111. Station B, 2222, and so on. I can see that station A connects to the switch on a port that I've nomenclated as E0. That stands for Ethernet 0. That would be maybe the first Ethernet port on that switch. E1 would be the second Ethernet port. I know that nomenclature may be a little bit confusing, but first port in most Cisco devices is actually labeled as 0. So E0, E1, E2, and E3, each connected to a single workstation. For the sake of this discussion, let's assume that the switch has just come up on the network and has not received data from any workstation yet. The switch maintains a table in memory called the MAC address table, or sometimes the CAM table. It stands for Content Addressable Memory. And the CAM table stores the relationship between the MAC addresses that are on the network and over which switch port they can be found. So the CAM table is going to have a structure like this. It's going to have a MAC address, if you will, column, and hopefully it's going to learn MAC addresses to place there. And then it's going to have an interface or port column. And that's going to reference the interface on the local switch over which data should be sent to reach a particular MAC address. Well, before we start building this CAM table, the method by which the CAM table is built is the switch has to receive frames from the network. Switching operation is dependent on three critical duties: the processes of learning, forwarding, and filtering. Step one is learning. The switch, when it first comes up, has an empty CAM table. It hasn't learned anything about the network yet. So the first thing it has to do is listen and try to learn MAC addresses and where they are. Well, how is the switch going to learn that station A is alive on the network? Well, station A is going to have to send a piece of data. Station A, when booting up, is going to be sending out frames. A frame that is sent from station A arrives on port E0. Now recall in our video on frames, the frame contains a source MAC address that's going to be, in this case, 1111. At that moment, the switch is going to learn that station A, or the MAC address rather, of 1111 can be found on port E0. And it can build that into the CAM table. So MAC address of 1111 was learned over port E0. Now, whatever the destination MAC address of the frame received is, it hasn't learned anything else yet. So the switch has no idea where to find what station A is trying to reach. That being true, it is going to flood, we call it, that frame out over every other connection. It's trying to find the host that A is trying to communicate with. Now let's say that A was trying to communicate with station C. So the destination MAC address within that frame was actually 3333. Station C does receive that frame. So did stations B and D, but because B and D were not the intended recipients, they simply throw the data away. But in the case of Station C receives the frame as the intended target and is going to reply to that frame. When Station C replies, it'll have a source MAC address of 3333, and then the switch will learn that 3333 is in fact connected to port E2. So it's accurate to say that the switch's CAM table will only be complete once every device on the network has had a chance to send a frame. Only then will it have learned all the MAC addresses on the network and the ports used to reach them. So if I just do the rest of the work by hand here, I'll say that 2222 can be reached over E1 and 4444 can be reached over E3. So now the MAC address table, the CAM table, is complete. And the learning process, while it does continue in case something else on the network does come alive, has built out the table successfully. Once the switch has learned where everything is, now it can intelligently forward data to where it needs to go. Once the CAM table is complete, the next time that A tries to send data towards any of these other three devices, for example, if I'm trying to target now station B, the destination MAC address of that frame coming into the switch is of course going to be 2222. The switch simply does a lookup in the CAM table, sees that 2222 can be reached over port E1, and intelligently forwards the frame to that single port. So when the switch intelligently forwards a unicast frame, it's preventing that frame from being seen on any of the other two ports, E2 and E3 in this case. So learning built the CAM table, and then forwarding takes advantage of the CAM table by sending data only to the ports required to receive it. So once again, in the case of C over E3. So now the MAC address table, the CAM table, is complete. And the learning process, while it does continue in case something else on the network does come alive, has built out the table successfully. Once the switch has learned where everything is, now it can intelligently forward data to where it needs to go. Once the CAM table is complete, the next time that A tries to send data towards any of these other three devices, for example, if I'm trying to target now station B, the destination MAC address of that frame coming into the switch is of course going to be 2222. The switch simply does a lookup in the CAM table, sees that 2222 can be reached over port E1, and intelligently forwards the frame to that single port. So when the switch intelligently forwards a unicast frame, it's preventing that frame from being seen on any of the other two ports, E2 and E3 in this case. So learning built the CAM table, and then forwarding takes advantage of the CAM table by sending data only to the ports required to receive it. So once again, in the case of C, trying to send data to D, the frame comes in to port E2. It'll look up D's MAC address as being 4444, find that E3 is the destination port, and once again, intelligently forward that frame. Intelligent forwarding of unicast frames only involves the ports that are required to see the data. To demonstrate filtering, I'm going to replace station C with a hub. Then connected to that hub, I'll have a few other stations. We'll just call them E, F, and G. Now, if you'll recall hubs are not switching capable. They receive electrical signaling and they repeat it to all ports. So anything that E, F, and G send, as far as frames, will be sent by the hub down to this switch in the middle. That being true, when stations E, F, and G first send a frame, that means that the CAM table here will add those MAC addresses also. So you'll end up seeing whatever those are. So for example, if E was 5555, the MAC address, and G was 6666, then you're going to have those two entries in the CAM table as well. Filtering would occur if station E was trying to reach station G. See, in this case, the frame coming from E would have a destination MAC address of 6666, which is station G. That frame, this being a hub, those electrical signals would get copied to both F and G. So the frame would get received by G successfully, but this being a hub, those bits would also be sent down to the switch in the middle. In this case, the switch is getting a request to send data to MAC address 6666, which it's already learned is on port E2. So in this case, the source and destination MAC addresses, 5555 and 6666, are both reachable on the same port. For this reason, the switch has no job to do. It assumes that the frame has already been successfully received by the recipient, and it doesn't have to forward anything. So you could say that forwarding is only involved when the source and destination MAC addresses are reachable over different ports on the switch. If they're reachable on the same port on the switch has no job to do, and the frame is filtered or thrown away. This video has described switch operation and how switches learn information off the network and then use that learned information, MAC addresses and ports necessary to reach them, to intelligently forward and sometimes
Content addressable memory. Source MAC address known the content of new entry is added to the table, then maps the source device MAC address to the port in which the frame was received. This is called MAC learning and allows the switch to build over time devices that are connected to a specific switch port. If the source MAC address is already mapped onto the port on the frame that was received, no changes are made to the switch CAM table. If the source MAC address is already MAC aging. The switch examines the destination MAC address of the frame. If the destination MAC address of the frame is a broadcaster, then this to all connected devices.
In this video, we're going to describe the three types of MAC addresses that can be used within Ethernet frames, and then talk about how those frames and addresses are interpreted and managed by switching equipment. We have the data or payload of the frame, which turns out is simply the packet being sent. On the end of the frame, we have something called a frame check sequence. We also have type fields and some headers called preambles and start frame delimiters. But most importantly, we have a destination MAC and a source MAC field. Each of these are 6 bytes in length. The source MAC field is the physical or burnt-in Ethernet address of the device sending this frame, and the destination MAC address is who you're trying to send the frame to. We're going to focus within this video on the destination MAC address because there are 3 types of addresses that you can put into that field. Now, if your intention is to simply send data to one device, to a single device, you're trying to talk to a local web server, or you're trying to talk to a router which will then get you closer to that web server. You're trying to talk to a local printer. You're trying to print something. So in all cases, you're intending this frame to be sent to and received by a single device. That is called a unicast address. 3 types of addresses you're going to see in a MAC address field are unicast, broadcast, and multicast. Unicast, una, means one. You have one recipient. So if you're trying to target one system, you need to put its 6-byte MAC address into that field. That MAC address might look something like, again, just making up a number here. And the number might look a little strange because it's expressed in hexadecimal. So you're going to get some letters and numbers in there too. But each of these segments represents 1 byte. That's a unicast address. And we'll talk about how switches handle unicast addresses as well as broadcast and multicast a little bit later in this video. So that's what you would put in this destination MAC field. If the intent is to send data to all recipients, not just one, but all, now you're looking at a broadcast frame. And the broadcast address looks quite a bit different than a unicast address. A broadcast address in hexadecimal is going to be a series of Fs. Now, a series of Fs, if you actually convert to binary, is going to be consecutive ones. 6 bytes or 48 bits of consecutive ones. So nothing but ones is going to get inserted into this field, and that designates it as a broadcast address. A multicast address is going to be intended for a group of recipients. Maybe a certain number of endpoints that are wanting to watch a streaming video, or a certain number of endpoints that you want to receive a message at the same time, but smaller than everyone, but more than one. Multicast, think of as a group of recipients. Now, the address that's going to go in this field for multicast really depends on the type of multicast group and the IP addressing that you're using, so I'm not going to talk about specifics there, but the ones you have to be aware of for the test are certainly unicast and broadcast. So note that in all 3 of these types of frames, we're only playing with the destination MAC address and based on how many devices you're trying to communicate with. The source MAC address, being that you're the one sending the data, would be the same across all 3. Now let's talk about how switches deal with different types of frame addresses. All right, to demonstrate how a switch reacts to these different types of frames, I've reproduced a network where we have 4 connected workstations, and note the switch has built its MAC address table, so it's had the chance to learn where all these 4 MAC addresses are, and then the ports required to reach them. Let's talk about a unicast piece of data first. So station A is trying to send a frame to station C. In that case, the destination MAC address is going to be 3333. This is a unicast frame. That being true, the data is sent to the switch. It looks up the destination MAC field. It sees 3333, finds it in the table, and it knows to send that data out port E2. Intelligently forwards the unicast frame out to port E2, leading to station C. Likewise, if station A was trying to reach B, it would put 2222 in the destination MAC field. And once again, this unicast frame would be intelligently forwarded by the switch out port Ethernet 1. In the case of a broadcast, let's say that station A is now sending out a broadcast frame for whatever reason. Maybe it's trying to ARP. Maybe it's trying to locate the MAC address of another node on the network. ARP requests are broadcasts. Maybe it's sending out a DHCP request to obtain an IP address configuration. Regardless, maybe it's a server that is trying to discover devices on the network using broadcast frames. For whatever reason, station A sends a broadcast addressed frame into the switch. Recall that a broadcast address is simply a series of 48 consecutive ones, all ones, or 6 bytes or 48 bits. When a switch receives a frame with this string of ones in the destination MAC field, it assumes that all ports on the switch should get a copy of this frame. So it takes a copy of it and sends it out E1, E2, and E3. Broadcast frames are propagated to all ports on the switch. Unicast frames, assuming that the switch has learned where that destination is, are intelligently forwarded to a single port. This is the default operation of all layer 2 switches. Lastly, a multicast frame by default is handled the same way as a broadcast frame. On a multicast frame, let's say that station A is a streaming video server and that stations C and D are currently registered to the multicast group that video is playing towards. The switch receiving a multicast frame will still, just like a broadcast, copy it everywhere. But in this case, the multicast frame will only be received by C and D and processed by their video player, while station B, realizing it's not part of that multicast group, will drop the frame. So the destination MAC address field of an Ethernet frame can have a unicast, broadcast, or multicast address. A unicast is intended for a single target, while a broadcast is intended for all recipients, everyone. Multicast is something in the middle intended for a subset or a group of hosts. Switches can intelligently forward unicast traffic, assuming that their MAC address table, their CAM table, has learned where that target is. But switches will always flood broadcast and
Okay, the unicast frame is sent to a single MAC address. Destination MAC address field frame. When a switch receives a unicast frame, the switch checks the CAM table to determine which port the destination host is connected to, and then forwards the frame to that port. The most significant bit of the most significant byte on the destination MAC address, the unicast frame or some other type.
In this video, we'll be discussing collision and broadcast domains, the network devices that define them, and how traffic flow is affected by these domains. Let's discuss collision domains first. In this picture, we have a simple hub, which, as we've discussed prior, is a simple multi-port repeater. Any signaling that's received by the hub is replicated to all other ports active on the hub. For instance, if this workstation on the left sends a frame out to the hub doesn't really see an Ethernet frame. The hub simply sees a sequence of bits coming in, which will then be replicated to all three other ports. All active hosts on the hub will see all transmissions. This doesn't depend on if it's a unicast frame, a broadcast frame. The hub only sees bits, so all bits are replicated completely to all other ports. It's essentially like all four endpoints in the picture are connected to the same wired segment. In the case where two systems are trying to send data at the same time, if A tries to send data and also B tries to send data, those bits will be received by the hub at the same moment. It'll try to replicate those bits to all ports, and you can see that a collision will occur. When a collision occurs, both original signals are destroyed, and both A and B will have to retransmit their data. This is true because all the ports on a hub are considered to be in one collision domain. So you could say a collision domain is defined by a region in your network within which, when two systems try to communicate simultaneously, their signals will collide and be destroyed. Important to note, again, that all ports connected to a simple hub are within the same collision domain. That's why a hub can only process one piece of data at a time. Only one station can be sending data through a hub at a given moment. Now let's consider what happens when we change out that hub with a switch. In a switched environment, every port connected to the switch is its own separate collision domain, meaning the switch is capable of supporting multiple concurrent
نه بیرون نمیرم خانه هستم ولی گوش نیستم.
conversations. The station on the left here could be talking to the station on top, and these two could also be talking at the same moment because there's no contention between the involved ports. Switches are more intelligent than hubs, and every switch port has its own processor. So in this case, every port being its own collision domain means the switch can support multiple concurrent conversations without fear of those signals colliding. Remember that a hub is considered a layer 1 in the OSI model, a layer 1 physical layer only device. It sees incoming voltage and replicates it. Another name for a hub is a multi-port repeater. A switch is a layer 2 device on the OSI model, so it has the ability to read frames and discern where a frame is intended to go. Because it has the ability to see destination MAC addresses, it can take data and intelligently forward it out one destination port. In this way, it avoids sending data out other ports where it's not needed. So far, we know that a hub and all its connected devices share a common single collision domain. We've also learned that a switch defines a collision domain for each of its connected ports. We need to also define what's called a broadcast domain. It's important to know in this picture that if any of these hosts send out a broadcast or multicast frame, meaning a broadcast, a frame that's intended for all parties, or multicast, a frame that's intended for a subset, a group of nodes, that the switch will still forward that data across all connected ports. So unicast frames are intelligently forwarded, while broadcast frames are still treated similar to like a hub, where they are sent to all connected ports. That being true, even though every port on the switch defines a separate collision domain, all the ports on the switch belong to a single broadcast domain. Now in a routed environment, things work a little bit differently. In this case, we have one router in the middle, connected to two switches on either side, and the switches have a few nodes connected to them. We already know that switches create collision domains. From the previous slide, we know that this is going to be a collision domain, this will be a collision domain, all links connected to the switch, including the link that connects to the router. Same on the other side. We have 1, 2, 3, and the fourth. So a total in this picture of 8 separate collision domains. And we know, based on that, if we're sending unicast frames, then any node trying to communicate to a different node through this switch will be intelligently sent through the switch only to that single destination port. But we also know that a broadcast frame sent from, let's say, this guy on the left into that switch, because all these ports belong to a single broadcast domain on the switch, we know the broadcast traffic will get sent to all connected ports, including the port connected to the router. So what happens when it hits the router? Well, because a router defines both a collision domain and a broadcast domain, broadcast traffic will not traverse the router. Every port on a router is both a collision and a broadcast domain. So in this diagram, you have 2 broadcast domains. And that's a good thing, because without these broadcast boundaries, a workstation, for example, sending out an ARP broadcast would end up propagating throughout every switch port on your network and be received by every node throughout your organization. Routers provide broadcast boundaries to prevent that. But they also provide collision domain boundaries as well. You need to know this for the exam. You might be given a schematic consisting of routers, switches, even hubs, and you'll have to define how many broadcast domains and collision domains are in the picture. In this video, we've discussed collision and broadcast domains and how their boundaries affect traffic.
on. So, I'm concerned.
In this video, we're going to discuss the 3 switching methodologies, which impact how much data a switch has to actually read off of a frame before it begins transmitting that frame, thus directly impact performance through the switch. In this case, we have a single switch connected to 2 endpoints, and for reference, I've drawn out the Ethernet frame format with its different fields. Quick review: in the front of an Ethernet frame, we're going to have fields called the preamble and the start frame delimiter. These are considered just the handshake, if you will, of a receiving frame. We then have the very important addressing fields. We have destination MAC and we have source MAC. So again, the target here, the sender here. We have a 2-byte type field, and then we have a variable size data field. It can be 46 to up to 1500 bytes depending on, well, what the frame is carrying. Then on the end, we have a 4-byte frame check sequence, or often called a checksum field, which is used for detecting if a bad frame was received. Thus, something happened on the network to corrupt the frame, possibly. And we have the frame check sequence field, which is used to detect if a frame was corrupted during transmission. For this video, we're focusing on how much of this data from front to back has to be read by this receiving switch before it can begin forwarding the data over to endpoint B. Now keep in mind, this frame can be 1500 plus bytes in length, or it could be as small as 64 bytes. That's important to know that the smallest size of an Ethernet frame is going to be 64 bytes. When station A is transmitting a frame for station B, the frame is transmitted starting with the preamble and again working back towards the frame check sequence, so again in this order. So the first field received by the switch here is going to be the preamble, followed by the start frame delimiter, followed by the destination MAC address. If you recall basic switch operation, the destination MAC address is really the only piece of information that a switch needs to recognize where that frame is going to be sent. If I recognize switch B's MAC address in my CAM table, I'll know immediately, oh, I have to send that in this direction. That device can be reached out this particular port or interface. So as soon as I get this much into the data, I have all the information I need to know to properly switch this frame. If I begin switching the frame after receiving just the destination MAC address, I read this far into it, and I begin sending the frame. Even as the rest of it is still coming in, that is called cut-through switching. That's the fastest switch methodology. I read a minimal amount of the incoming frame, and then I forward based on that information. So while cut-through mode is very fast, it does have one glaring problem, that what if the rest of this data following the destination MAC address was corrupt somehow? The rest of that frame is still coming into the switch. What if it gets to the frame check sequence on the end and detects that the frame is corrupt? Well, in this case, most of the frame has already been sent through the switch, so B is going to receive a corrupt frame and discard it. You can't pull the frame back at that point. So the primary risk of cut-through switching, while fast, is that you run the risk of forwarding corrupt frames. The second mode of switching is called fragment-free. Now, the smallest possible frame size for an Ethernet frame is 64 bytes. Knowing that, fragment-free mode will read 64 bytes into the frame. Once it reads 64 bytes into the data, fragment-free mode knows that the frame is at least a properly sized frame. It's not smaller than 64 bytes, which would make it a runt, which is the result of a collision occurring. If I can read 64 bytes into the data, then I know it's at least a properly sized Ethernet frame, and I will start forwarding the data over to station B. So it goes one step beyond cut-through. Cut-through only cares about, do I know where it's going, and it's gone. In fragment-free, I verify at least, hey, this is a minimally sized Ethernet frame before I start that process. Of course, you still run the risk, because I haven't gotten to the frame check sequence yet, of having passed a corrupt frame. This is the second fastest switching mode. Okay, so we've learned that cut-through switching will start forwarding a frame after reading just the destination MAC address. We've learned that fragment-free switching will read 64 bytes into the data, which let's say that's about here, and then forward. Both of these methods are subject to still passing corrupt frames because the frame check sequence hasn't been yet read. The final switching mode is called store and forward, and with store and forward, there is no risk of sending a corrupt frame. Because in store and forward mode, I don't begin forwarding the data until I have read the entire frame, including the frame check sequence, compute my own frame check sequence, verify that they match, and I know for sure that what I've received is a well-formed, properly sized, and non-corrupt frame. Only then, after I've error-checked it that way, does the switch forward that frame out to station B. So it's pretty apparent that store and forward mode is going to be the slowest, if you will, or the highest latency or delay switching mode. But the benefit is you know for sure that you're not going to be passing corrupt frames. In reality, it also turns out that modern switching hardware, even when running in store and forward mode, is so fast today that you generally are not going to see any latency associated with using it over cut-through or fragment-free switching. This video has discussed the three types of switching modes, cut-through, fragment-free, and store and forward, and their impact on latency and frame forwarding.
Planning and designing a local area network for a large organization consists of more than just hooking up all of the computers into a single switch with whatever media or cables you might have on hand. While this approach might work for small networks, larger networks require careful planning and design, or else connection speeds and performance will suffer. When designing and planning local area networks, there are two major considerations for network engineers. First is the type and cable length required to connect to network devices. Second is how the network devices will be interconnected using various switches. You should already be familiar with the first consideration, the different types of network media and their individual constraints, such as speed and distance limitations. So, in this lesson, we're going to focus on the second consideration by taking a look at the two major topologies that network designers use to create optimized local area networks. In network environments that contain thousands of interconnected devices, multiple network switches are required, and each of these switches fulfill one of three different roles. They're either an access switch, a distribution switch, or a core switch. An access switch, as its name suggests, gives end users access to the local area network. That is, end user devices are connected to access switches, and these switches send data to and from specific computers or nodes that are connected to them. In an office building, oftentimes each floor will contain one or more access switches with cables that run from the switch to individual rooms or cubicles. Now, each of these access switches communicate with each other through what are called distribution switches. Typically, each access switch will be connected to a distribution switch using one or more ports or uplinks. The reason for the multiple connections is not only to increase redundancy, but also to increase the maximum bandwidth between the switches. In addition, these access switches are oftentimes connected to multiple distribution switches, and each of these distribution switches are linked to each other via high-speed connections, often a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. Now, the number of distribution switches in a network will depend on how many connected devices and how many access switches are in the network. This network can be broken down into what are called the access layer, which contains all the access switches, and the distribution layer, which contains all the distribution switches. In some cases, these two layers, the access layer and the distribution layer, are enough. And this type of network design is called a two-tier design, or is sometimes referred to as a collapsed core design. As you can see in this figure, hundreds or even thousands of PCs can be connected to numerous access switches, which in turn are connected to multiple distribution switches. There are also redundant links between the access switches and the distribution switches, and between the distribution switches themselves. And access to the outside network is managed through one or more routers connected to the distribution layer. The reason this design is sometimes referred to as a collapsed core design is because they don't have a distinct third layer, which is called the core layer. To illustrate this, let's say instead of one building, this company had several buildings close to each other, and they're all connected to the same network. In this scenario, each building has access switches on each floor and two distribution switches per building. To connect the buildings, multiple uplinks would be run between the distribution switches in each building. And for redundancy reasons, each of the distribution switches would be connected to all other distribution switches to create a fully interconnected mesh design. This design approach works reasonably well with smaller networks. However, it's important to realize that these uplinks between buildings, the media that connects the distribution switches, are very expensive. And the more distribution switches or buildings that are added, the number of uplink cables that are needed increases substantially. As you can see, the cost of connecting these buildings can get very expensive very fast. Because of this, company networks such as this one will often opt for the second type of network design known as a three-tier design. This design adds an additional layer called the core layer. The purpose of this core layer is to connect the distribution switches. Connections between core switches and distribution switches, and between multiple core switches, are typically very high speed and provide very high forwarding rates throughout the campus network. By using a core design, redundant connectivity between distribution switches is still maintained. However, the number of uplinks required to connect each building is reduced considerably. This in turn reduces the cost of connecting buildings. Now, in this diagram, the core switches are located at the center of the network design. However, in the real world, most core switches will typically be placed in the same location as other distribution switches. But for our illustration purposes, we've placed them in the center here. That's it for this lesson. In this lesson, we looked at the two primary design architectures of large
Sure, you have used a set of bridges and routers to segment your LAN into smaller networks. Which results when you get routers to segment into smaller networks. Decrease congestions on each segment. Which of the following results of using a router to segment a network? Increase the number of collision domains and broadcast. Few devices per broadcast domain. Additional routers increase the number of broadcast domains, reducing the number of devices within the domain. Yeah. You have a network switch. Each switch port is connected to a workstation or server host. It's not true. It's reduced. It's not true. Cut through. Yeah, full frame, fragment free, and cut through. Free, store and forward. Okay. Switch reads the first fragment free. This question includes an average to half in. How many collision domains? Okay. 1 collision, 2, 3, 4. 4 collision domains. Device B sends the front device in. Device A sends device B. Switch has an entry count for device A and device A, but not. Device B sends a frame to device A on the network shown in the exhibit. The switch lab now for device A, but not no. You have a new switch that you have just connected to the network as shown in exhibit. After connecting the switch to the network, host B sends a frame to host A, host B sends a single. To host D. Got host A, host B, got host B, okay. Okay. The source MAC address. Okay, gotcha. You have a switch connected to a small network as shown in exhibit. I hope connecting the switch has the following. Okay. Workstation 1 sends out workstation 5. Frame address to workstation 1. What will the switch do with the frame selected? Daria has it. Workstation 1. I wish I could move this. Workstation 1 sends a what? Yo, dude, what's going on, man? How you doing? How's your night going so far? Workstation 1 sounds a Workstation 5. What will the switch do? Nice, man. Good to hear. Just studying networking right now. Tomorrow I have to study. A little bit, for some reason today I'm a little bit dumber than usual. Not sure why. Well, I know kind of why, but yeah. A little bit tired. 5, what will the switch do with the frame? Except, yeah, I saw you come in one day. Maybe it was 2 or 3 days ago. Me and Hans and someone else from the stream, we were doing Wim Hof. I saw you come in and then you left. You didn't say anything, but yeah. Well, send the frame just forward the frame out all ports. Drop the frame. Yep, I think that's right. Yep. Okay. That's all right. It's all good, man. That's all good. No problem. Select 3. Which of the following describes the role of distribution switches and how they are implemented in the design of a local area network? On a unit connected to a distribution. Which of the following? I think. Fucking hell. This? What? I hate this. Which of the following describe the role of core switches and how they are implemented in the design of a local area network? No. Not used. Slide. Connected to distribution. Oh, maybe it's. I don't know. I don't know. Fucking hell, I almost had it right. Shit! These are so tough. They're so tricky. And I think I failed the exam. Yep. 69. Okay, we'll come back to this shit. That really tells me. Yeah, man, chess is going good. If you're wondering, I want to finish the book, my book, hopefully in 10 more days, but it's going to take a little bit longer. I am, let's see, how far am I on the Bobby Fischer book? Yeah. 181. 181 pages in. So I have about 100 pages left till I get to the end. But it's going good. I think I've become more aware. I've become better for sure. I've improved, so it's going good. But I still need to train today. And yeah, I kind of this week has been a kind of a shit week for chess. I was pretty busy at work and didn't have enough time to do shit, and I was kind of lazy, to be honest. But hopefully this week I'll pick it up again, get this shit ready. Anyways, back. Yep.
This video will discuss the basics of configuring a Cisco Layer 2 switch. This turns out to be pretty simple because all the interfaces on Cisco switches are live by default. You could pull a Cisco switch out of the box, plug it in, start plugging workstations.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Did you get to that university that you wanted to? I think you got a couple of Ivy League schools
Into it, and it will start learning the MAC addresses of those workstations automatically. It'll start building its MAC address database called the CAM table, and then start forwarding data intelligently or filtering data when it doesn't have to forward them. So switches really are plug and play in the Cisco world. Does that mean you don't have to configure them? No, they still need the protection of passwords. They still need IP addresses so you can remotely access them, and other basic configuration settings. So let's talk about some of those. Once again, a Cisco switch out of the box is live on all its ports. So plug it in and start hanging devices off of it. A couple workstations here. And it will start building its MAC address table, again also called a content addressable memory or CAM table, automatically. You don't have to turn on or configure any aspect of the ports. There are certainly configurable items on the interfaces, but none of them are required for basic port connectivity. So what things should you configure on a switch if they are in fact plug and play? Well, most importantly, passwords. As discussed in a different video, there are different types of passwords that protect access to command modes on Cisco devices. You should minimally configure console, virtual terminal or VTY, and enable mode
Congrats,
passwords.
Man. Congrats. Very nice. Yeah, just you're doing good, man. For 17 years old, you're doing good. What was I going to tell you? Yeah, I wish I was as smart as you when I was 17. But yeah, you got a good head on your shoulders. Just study, work hard, and don't play too many video games. You're 17, so don't smoke. I'm not saying never smoke. I'm just saying go have fun in school, but don't be always about fun. But you should know all this. Seems like you're a smart dude, so I don't know why I'm telling you this. But yeah, you'll do fine, man. You'll be alright. No, I mean surely. I'm not saying your parents didn't have any effect on you. Obviously they had, but also yourself. So don't bring yourself down. Just don't say that it was just my parents. You put in the hard work too. So that's good, man.
There are no passwords by default on any Cisco equipment. You should define these to protect access.
You're still in high school, right? Yeah, obviously. I highly recommend for you to start learning Python this summer when it comes. Summertime, I know it's your last year and you probably want to have fun outside and go out with your friends and whatnot. But 1 hour a day or something is not much. And you'll learn, I'm sure you will learn and enjoy Python. Yeah. And let me know if you have some computer questions. I'm not the greatest Python. I'm not that good at all. But you remember, I will code for food, and there's another person on my stream. They're both really good, smart Python guys, so you could ask them. I'm more of a networking
user
guy.
Mode and privileged mode on the device. You also want to configure the switch with an IP address. The primary purpose for an IP address on a Layer 2 switch is so that you can remotely access that switch after it's been initially configured. Remember that there are two methods of accessing Cisco equipment. You can connect to a Cisco device directly with a console cable or remotely using applications such as Telnet or Secure Shell. But to connect to a switch remotely means you're going to be connecting to it based on its IP address. So that has to be defined on the switch. Layer 2 switch would have a single IP address used for remote management. And then lastly, you'd want to define a default gateway on the switch. This works in tandem with the IP address so that you can access the switch even if you're not connected to the same network as the switch. In the example here, let's assume that the switch is connected to a router, and that router is connected to another switch, which is where you are. Now, each interface in a router defines a different network to the system. The devices on the left side of the router, so these, are on one network, and the devices on the right side of the router are on a different network. In fact, that's the definition of routing, is the movement of data from one network to another. But now, because your workstation is not on the same network as the switch, you cannot access it directly by IP unless you have default gateways defined on both sides. The default gateway is the device that you have to pass data towards first to get beyond your own network. So if this is my workstation on the left and I'm trying to get to something on the right, my default gateway would point to the local interface of the router servicing my network. The switch, in a similar fashion, would have to have a default gateway configured that points to its local router interface. The default gateway enables devices to get to networks other than their own. Once these are defined, then I could use Telnet or Secure Shell or web protocols to remotely access the switch for management reasons. This video discussed some of the very basics in setting up a Cisco Layer 2 switch, which amounts essentially to password definitions, IP addressing, and a default gateway. Additional videos will cover advanced topics such as virtual LANs, port security, and access control lists. In this demo, we're going to discuss basic switch interface configuration. I'm currently connected to the console port of switch A. If I hit enter here, I'll see the banner that we've configured in a different demo, as well as its prompting for a user mode password, which I will type in. To configure anything on a switch, you have to first enter enable or privileged mode. So I will enter that and again get prompted for that password. Now before I enter configure mode, I'm going to type a couple show commands to take a look at what this switch currently is and what interfaces are involved. If I type show version, I can verify that this is a Cisco 2960 model switch. We can see that it does have 24 fast Ethernet and 2 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. I can also type show IP interface brief to get a summarized view into all those interfaces and their current status. And what you'll notice for all of them, except for the virtual interface on top, VLAN 1, is that they are in a down state. By spacebar to get to the rest of the output, the same is true for all of them, including the gig interfaces on the bottom. Now that's simply because I don't have anything plugged into this switch currently. By default, all interfaces on Cisco Layer 2 switches attempt to be up by default. Meaning out of the box, if you power the device up and you plug workstation.
Hey man, thanks for coming tonight. I know this is boring. I already did my chess. Yeah, have a good night, man. Enjoy your days. If I see you on the stream, if I see you next time and we're doing Wim Hof and you're not doing it with us, I'm gonna be very upset. But yeah, try to do, if you come in again and we're doing Wim Hof, please join us. And yeah, have a good night. Sweet dreams, man.
Stations into it, then those ports will automatically become live. You don't have to manually activate them. So again, down here is not a bad thing. It simply means that I have no connected devices currently. Okay, so let's take a look at some basic Layer 2 interface configuration. I'm going to go into configure mode. And now I'm going to pick a couple interfaces here. Let's take a look at interface Fast Ethernet 01. Let's say this connects to workstation 1. If I do a question mark here, I can see a list of the commands that are available in interface mode. There are quite a few, but the two I'm going to focus on here are duplex And on the next page, you'll see a speed option. By default, all interfaces on Cisco Layer 2 switches are set to Auto, Configure Speed, and Duplex. A best practice recommendation is to configure interfaces with the specific speed and duplex of the devices that will be connected to them. So I'm going to do that here. Instead of having the Ethernet interface auto-sense and try to negotiate if there's a 10 or a 100 megabit per second device connected, I will set the speed manually to 100. And I will also set the duplex to full. This is a 24-port fast Ethernet switch. So what if you wanted to do this on all 24 ports of the switch? It would be time-consuming to repeat these two commands on 24 individual ports. So what you can do is use the interface range command. With the range command, I can select a contiguous range, multiple contiguous ranges, or even specific ports, but all on one command line. For example, if I want to configure ports 2 through 6 and 10 through 18 in a similar fashion, I can use this command to identify those two ranges, and then execute the same commands, and it will affect all of them. To verify this, I could use the show run command, which normally, if you'll recall, is a command you would execute in privileged mode. In fact, to demonstrate this error, I can type show run from this mode, and you'll see that it will error out, because the show command is not recognized in a non-privileged mode level. However, several years ago, Cisco did introduce the do command, so if I precede the command with the word do, then type show run, it will work. I can verify that the speed and duplex settings are now active for all those ports involved in the ranges I specified. When the command completes, I'm still in interface mode. Now, I mentioned earlier that all Cisco Layer 2 switch ports are not in a disabled state by default, meaning that if something is connected to that device and active, then the switches will be in an up state. If there are certain switch ports on the device that you know will have nothing connected to them, you can manually shut them down. For example, I type exit here and go to interface, for example, fast Ethernet 020, and I know that port is currently not connected to anything, so I don't want someone just plugging in and getting a connection. I could actually force that interface into a shutdown state. I type the word shutdown, and now I will exit config mode. You can see the message comes up that the port has been administratively shut down. I'm going to repeat the same show IP interface brief command. And you'll note that while all the other ports that I did config are still in a down state because nothing is plugged into them yet, that port 020 is now administratively shut down. So now if I even plug something in to port 20, the port would not allow the connection. Okay, to finish this demonstration, I just plugged a device into the fast Ethernet 024 port on the switch, and you can see that it automatically changed the state of that port to up. And if I repeat the show IP interface command, brief again, we'll go all the way down to the bottom. You'll see that port 24 is now up. I did not have to manually activate that port. As soon as it detected that there was a device plugged into it, that it could communicate, then the port automatically came up and will allow traffic. If at this point I plugged that same device into port 20 on this switch, because I manually shut that port down, it would remain administratively down. And once again, after you've configured anything on a Cisco device that you want to make permanent, you have to remember to save your changes. So I will type copy, run, star. This is again short for copy the running config to the startup config. Confirm it. All my changes are permanent. This demo has discussed basic Layer 2 switch interface configuration.
Okay, so use config VLAN. Okay. Duplex half, no shutdown. Okay, so you're in the process of configuring the switch ports on branch 1 switch. Delivery devices are currently attached to the switch as shown in the diagram. Soon add an older server to switch port FA06 that uses T Ethernet. Manually configure the switch port to use 10 megabits. Okay, so which branch are we on? On branch 1. Alright, on. Okay, we enable config T interface. You will soon add an older server to switch port FA06, interface FA06, and no shutdown. And manually configure the switch port to use 10 megabyte speed. Speed 10. Okay. You'll be adding a hub to switch port event that will be used for lab. For a lab, manually configure the switch port to use half duplex communication. Okay, interface FA07. And speed. Duplex half. Duplex full auto half. That will be used for lab. Manually configure the switch port to use duplex communication half. No shutdown. Okay. Make sure that port F are enabled and can be used. Beware that you have not yet connected devices to these ports. Disable all unused interfaces. Okay, so then we go show brief. Show interface brief. show interface status. Okay. FA06, we have not connected, one auto and speed 10. Okay. FA07 connected, one half auto speed auto. Disable. Okay. Interface. Disable all other. FA04. Oops. 045. Config T interf. I have to P interface FA04. 5. Face range FA04 5. 05. I don't know how to do this. Interface FA. Okay. Shutdown. 05. Shutdown. FA through. Okay. Exit. Interface range FA 08 to 23. That is annoying me. How do you do? F8 to 23. Shutdown. Right. And then interface GI01 shutdown, interface GI2 shutdown. Okay, I have to pee. Show interface is brief. Show GI02. Show running config. Okay, 03 duplex F 4 shut down, F05 is shut down. Six. So what? Speed 10, right? Phase 7, what do we use? 7 duplex F, phase 8 shut down, 9, 11 shut down, 12 shut down. Yep. Till 23, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24, F8 24 is shut down. Why is F8 24 shut down? And 15 interfaces, phase 024, no shutdown. And then again, and copy, run start. That really pisses me off.
In this demo, we're going to the layer 2 switch manually to command. With the range command, I can, in fact, to demonstrate this error, when the command is connected to fast Ethernet 0, ports that I did config are still in a down state because, and now I will exit config mode and see the message comes up that the port has been administratively shut down. I'm going to repeat the same show, IP, interface, ref command, and you'll note that while all the other ports that I did config are still in a down state because
zeros down. Duplex half. Come. Now shut down. Home. And use the enter. Shut down. Interface. GI. Oops. GI, not FI. Shut down. Interface. FA. No shutdown. And okay, show IP brief. Show interface. Status, okay. 2 is on. Okay, speed auto. Config T, interface, FA. Duplex auto. Interface, FA is 03. Duplex auto. And shut down. Okay, copy running. Startup config. Yes. Okay. We have been experiencing internal switch 2 to check the status of interface. You run the following command. Switch 2. Yes. The device connected GI and there's a link speed mismatch on GI. How do I know? I have no idea. I don't know how to tell. Show the GI02 status. Connected trunk, A full, A1000. I have no idea. The device connected to. Oh yeah. Alright, I was connected to the using a straight through cable Ethernet interface, and the workstation has been manually. Link speed and okay. Search on the GI interface. What the fuck? What? Our workstation is connected to a switch on the GI interface using a straight through cable. The Ethernet interface in this version has been manually configured to use 100 megabits link speed and full duplexing. Switch interface? No. No. What the fuck? I think this is right. I don't know if the link speed is 1000 or 5. If the link speed is 10 megabits. Wow, I don't know any of these. What the fuck? 3 of them is correct? Which of the following are true in this scenario? There's 10 megabits or 100 full duplexes used. Okay. If the link speed is 1000 megabits, half duplex is used. No. 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 I think it's this. Jesus Christ. What the fuck? By default, the link speed and duplex count for Ethernet. Okay. I don't get it. This is terrible. Global config mode. Interface, fast Ethernet interface, set the speed. Speed, what are we doing? Okay. I know this is right. You need to disable the fast switch. Switch, write the command, enter global config, enter the interface configuration menu, 00 interface, 00, disable the interface, shut down is disabled, speed auto, show IP interfaces. Okay, that's right. The fact that the interface on a switch is currently disabled, you need to enable it so the OS can be connected to it, right? Commands, enter global configuration mode, config T, interface FA00, you need to enable it, yeah. You need to enable it so it can be connected. Enable the interface, no shutdown, no shut. And verify the interface is enabled, show interfaces status. Fuck, I failed this shit too again. Fuck my life. Anyways, that's okay. That sucks. Shit on this.
Күз кез көз, күш кеш көш, кір кер көр, күл кел көл, кілең қысқа сөз кім оқиды тез. Арқада алтарқар бар, қырқада қырғарқар бар, қырғарқарда ағарқар бар, алтарқарда марқарқар бар. Әбдіреде әбігер әтеш отыр, әбігер әтеш отырған әбдірені әжем ашып отыр. Гүлің
Today on the H3 Report, Rice Gum goes after Ela Klein.
I think this fool is depressed or whatever because his girl be just so whack. Like, I'm sorry, someone has to say it.
More like Rice Scum Got him!
Monotone Monica over here. Nah, I'm just kidding. I don't know her name, but like for real, she's just so boring.
Next up, what's going on with these yellow thumbnails? You've seen them all over YouTube. It's genius, memeing on everybody.
I be flossing. I be flossing. I be flossing.
And finally, YouTube has finally addressed the trending issue. Everybody has been complaining. We want to see more wholesome, real, representative videos on trending of creators. And YouTube has responded resoundingly with obese man bathing in trough. Today, on the epic return of the H3 report. The first story of the day comes from Rice Gumby. Now, I'm not going to be calling him Rice Gum anymore. I'll be calling him Rice Gumby. Because just like the toy Gumby, he's soft, enjoyed by 10-year-olds, and forgotten about by most people. Now, in Rice Gumby's response video, he in the thumbnail calls Hila a liar, which is based on really nothing at all, and then he goes on to call me a hypocrite. Is it possible that Rice Gum actually thinks that hypocrite is hypocrite?
Yo, how is everybody doing, man? It's kind of cold in my room, so I had to do what I had to do. But look at this dude, man. Just look at this dude.
For someone who's all about flexing and showing off their wealth, I have to say, I find it a little bit hilarious that you cannot afford heating. I recommend, instead of buying Louis Vuitton Supreme jackets, possibly investing in a furnace.
I don't know, he's just a big hater. I guess it makes sense because he says he's like depressed or something, which really doesn't make sense why he's depressed, honestly, because like, I mean, money isn't everything and fame isn't everything, but like he has both of that. And like YouTube is like a dream job and people would probably want to be in his shoes, so he needs to chill out. Like I'm really trying to think, like, I'm not a therapist or anything, and this is like towards the end of the video, so a lot of people might not even see this, so I'm just gonna say how it is. I think this fool is depressed or whatever because his girl be just so whack. Like I'm sorry, someone has to say it, but like every time his girl is in a video, bro, it's just crickets.
So I'll just walk into the house and look through their shit and find guns.
Monotone Monica over here. Nah, I'm just kidding. I don't know her name, but like for real, she's just so boring, bro. And maybe you're just bored of her or just like surround with some high energy girls, cause like you probably can. I mean, you got the money and the clout, right? At the end of the day. Anyways, man, just be happy, man. Like,
so apparently Rice Gumby, PhD, has determined that the reason that I'm depressed is my beautiful pregnant wife. The reason that anything good has happened in my life. His main claim is that Hila is boring, and I think really there's just only one response to that.
You smell that? It smells like fried rice. You say Hila's boring, well, let's start there. She's a self-made millionaire. Served her country, made a company, immigrated to a new country. She got the bag without selling her soul and broke the mold.
All I'm trying to say is it was a mistake. Probably should have done it, and it'll never happen again. But shit, I made the bag. Shit.
Yeah, but she got the bag without selling her soul. So did it feel good though?
did it feel good though?
Now let's talk about you, Rice. You chase clout to fill a hole in your soul without substance. You will disappear. You need love, son. I wish your mom would hear. Your bitterness comes from the reality that the most interesting thing about you is your money.
Probably should have done it, and it'll never happen again. But shit, I made the bag.
Cause kids are growing up, can't afford heat. Rice is all you eat.
I made the bag.
To play friends, your girls to play girls. How fast they run when your money curves.
I made the bag.
Cause kids are growing up, can't afford heat. Rice is all you eat.
I made the bag.
To play friends, your girls to play girls. How fast they run when your money curves.
Damn, Gumby, when you find a girl that's got moves like that, then you can come at me talking about high energy girls. I got the best girl in the frickin' world. If you're gonna come after me, you better come harder than that, dog. And I didn't even have to pay her to pretend to like me. But that's okay, because you just got paid $200,000 for selling gambling to kids. When you've wasted all that way trying to flaunt how wealthy you are, you may want to change your name from Rice Gum to just Rice, because I'm afraid that's all you'll be able to afford to eat. But hold on, I'm not finished. Remember at the end where he's like, yo, sorry, $10, $20.
Nothing I can really do but say sorry and give you these Amazon gift cards. So I'm sorry, it just wouldn't happen again. Amazon codes $10 to $20, just a little giveaway. It's the least I can do after, this.
This gentleman here called Amazon himself to check on these codes, and he found out that they were redeemed months ago, before this video was even made. So Rice Gum gave out used and old Amazon codes.
It was placed on the 23rd of May, 2018.
It's the least I can do.
Rice Gum was trying to redeem himself, but ironically, he had already redeemed himself months ago with his own codes. I wonder if he spent them on tissues to wipe the tears away when he realized the girls he pays to pretend like they like him don't actually like him. Got him! Hey Rice, did it feel good though? Next story, we have Genius. Now Genius is a YouTube channel that brings on reputable musical talents to come explain their lyrics. They've had artists like Post Malone, Logic, 21 Savage, Joji, Rich Brian, titans of the music industry. But one genius over at Genius decided, hey, what if we bring on memes? And it was a stroke of, dare I say, genius. It keeps going too. You start to wonder, is there something wrong with this kid? Was this video not edited properly? There's no sound, right? The kids got on like 10 jackets for some reason. Like, what's going on here, right? I'm intrigued.
I be flossing. I be flossing. I be flossing. I be flossing.
Ooh, I love how he hits that last note. He really shows off his musical mastery.
I be flossing.
I be flossing. I was like, oh, Mariah Carey in the building. Break a glass with that voice, you know what I'm saying?
Flossing is the dance that took the world by storm on the internet.
How are you not having a heat stroke, first of all? I be sweating. I would say unless he lives on Mars, he's probably overdressed.
If you can't do it, I'm about to show you how. First you spread your legs, then you put your arms out and go left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right.
I don't think his instructions are good, because I don't think I'm flossing.
Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right.
I don't think your instructions are good, bro.
Right, left, right, left, right. Turn it up. The first thing you want to do is spread your legs. And then you want to put your arms out. And then you want to go left to right, left to right, left to right, left to right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left.
So there you go. A lot of people are saying, Genius must be stopped. We must stop Genius.
As I walk through the valley of the shadow.
Bam, yo, Joey, what's up?
Mikey, what are you doing? You look ridiculous.
Bam, yo, I'm a styrofoam.
This next song is a folk song that I just recently wrote. It's called The Ballad of Billy John. Billy John was a simple man, worked in the fields most his life, but provided for his wife and kids and left his dreams on the side. One day when the kids left home, well, he picked up his guitar. It had been a while, but his fingers still knew how to reach the heart. He played a song about life and love, his hopes and regrets. Then with a little prodding from the missus, he put it on the internet. When the views started pouring in, tears of joy started to fall. Then they scrolled to the comments section, and this is what they saw. Eat a bag of shit, cunt face. Go and blow your fucking dad. This shit just raped my ears, never heard nothing so bad. I hope you fucking die.
My grandfather sadly passed away, but he kind of left me and my siblings a small inheritance. I decided to invest in updating my... computers for my self-employed lifestyle of playing music, teaching music, and my YouTube channel, which is music. I wanted a studio on wheels I can take on tours, bring the skills, and not need updating for years and years. So I dropped that big coin on a top-spec 15-inch 2016 MacBook. The first one rattled like there was something loose in there. But no biggie, swap you for another one. This one was great, until it rattled like there was something loose in there. We can repair it for you so you know it'll be perfect. Sure, I said, until I got it back and the Thunderbolt ports didn't work. Nice repair, guys. Third one was good, until it rattled like there was something loose in there. It had been a year at this point, so I traded up to the latest model. And it was awesome, it never rattled. Instead, the hinge broke and the left speaker blew out. After begging like the scrub I am for my money back, I got a base model 5K iMac for my music production, and this thing to take to teaching work. I call it the Nugget Book, and I kinda like it. For the first 4 months, the iMac was weaving all of my dreams until it stopped doing that. This was common. This too slow, system overload, this too slow. It got to the point where I couldn't listen to any of my own tracks anymore, so I had to call Apple support. We did scans, it was inconclusive. I noticed it's not backing up to my time capsule anymore. It's over a terabyte? But the computer can't even hold that. And it's not even full. With my backup being weird, I copied important files into my iCloud drive. The fortress in the sky. But that's when the bad times started. The next day or so, my iMac wipes my user account. It's gone. No big deal. It's only my life. I panic called Apple support later and they suggest using my time capsule backup, which managed to back up to the corrupted machine with my user account missing. So I had to use a backup from ages ago with heaps of stuff missing. But it's okay! Everything's in iCloud Drive! But dreams don't happen in real life. I got all my stuff back, except for my iMovie library file, which contains all video projects I've ever made. Whole YouTube channels in there. You can't save individual projects in iMovie, just a huge 120 gigabyte library file. It would download halfway, and then stop. Text says to sign in out of iCloud Drive, which was made difficult, but it didn't fix the problem. We tried to download the file on the MacBook, same thing. Tried downloading through a browser, nope. Signing out of iCloud Drive on the MacBook and now iCloud is ruined. It wants 500 gigs of storage on my MacBook. It can't even hold that. And now it can't send emails, only receive them. That's useful. You can't even cancel the download. iCloud just locks up. All syncing to do with iCloud, nah. Why is this number going up? Why is it downloading anything? Look, the internet works. Look, it works. Download something. It's about now that the iMac can't search its own hard drive anymore. Come on, you soggy scrub, I've already found it for you. It's in this folder. It's like letting a kid win hide and seek by standing in an open corner and I still can't find you. Time to call Apple again. I can wait, my reference number on the phone just rings and rings and rings. So I've got to start all over again. Welcome to Apple support. What's the problem today? 40 minutes later, I now have another specialist, which is fine as the other guy was getting pretty loose, just making up names and call each other whatever. Hey, it's all fun. Tank number 2 is great though. We get in touch with actual developers, we run some profiles, we write some terminal codes. Yeah! I'm a hacker now! We send off the files to the developers team and then nothing. I wait a few weeks and nothing. So I write them an email asking if there are any updates. And then waited a few weeks. Nothing. Well, time to start all over again. Hey, Apple support, what do you need? 1 hour of explaining later. Enter Tech 3. This guy's great, especially with me getting a little irate that it's been 2 months at this stage, and also the fact that the booking manager that worked with Silverchair offered me a show in Brisbane for my YouTube channel. He wanted a 1 hour video, but with my video project lost in iCloud Drive, I had to turn it down. Just a small dream destroyed. But this is when the iMac really starts to blow my expectations of bad things. Logic says no, it won't open anymore. No more work then, woo! Day off! Bills don't exist when you work for yourself, right? Apple support doesn't really know. Oh, it's okay, it works again until... all I want to do is copy this sample and paste it here. Why is it out of order? Why is it doing that? Why is it playing sound where there's nothing? But it's cool, this one totally fixed itself too, by corrupting the file the next day or so, destroying 2 weeks of work. Can't have sample issues if you can't open the file, right? More Logic profiles are behaving weird. And this is when I stopped using the computer. I was asked by a huge podcast to write a quick track for a live show of theirs in Chicago. That's pretty exciting. Did I use my home studio that I spent a lot of my spare time and money building? No. I had to use this setup instead. And you know what? I had no problems at all. That iMac is junk. Now we're here today. It's been 4 months and I don't have a single answer as to why did my iMac erase my user profile? Why wasn't it backing up properly? Why can't I download my iCloud files? Why couldn't I get in touch with my first tech? Where did my second tech go? Why can't my computer find anything? Why is Logic Pro failing corrupting? Why can't I send emails? Why can't you call me on my actual phone? Yes, this is a thing. They can't call me on my iPhone XS. I get their voicemails and missed call icons, but I never hear the phone ring. I have no idea. They have no idea. This is a $2,000 phone that they make. I had to get a $20 iPhone 4 and separate SIM card service and keep it on me at all times just to get through hours of these calls. With the iMac unplugged and my MacBook not sending emails, I'm down to my phone to run my work through. Which has stopped sending me email notifications, by the way. Joke's on me for using iCloud email services too. Was it because I didn't spend enough money over the years? Did you need more money? I was sure I'd spent enough money. Maybe there's a DLC of Mr. or Loot Crate or something. I'm supporting Apple. Boy, I wish they'd support me.
Okay, now I don't know how familiar you are with internet scams. Here's one I received a while back. It's offering me the chance to collect a prize I've won in a raffle I've never entered. I'm going to win a $1.5 million and a BMW Series 5 car. Now this is a scam, obviously. I used to go to great lengths to bait these scammers and try and cultivate a lengthy and wasteful conversation with them just to waste their time and annoy them. I've actually recently hit upon a technique that has almost as good an effect but requires almost zero effort. I call it just say okay to scammers. So yeah, we got the email. It came in from Mrs. Rachel Adams, telling me to get in touch with Mr. Daniel Gary to collect my $1.5 million and my car. So I replied and I said, okay. Almost immediately I had a reply from Daniel Gary saying, please send your details so I can send it to the delivery company that will deliver to you. And have it in the back of your mind, it will cost you some little fee. But if you don't mind, I can assist with part of the fee. But before I can do that, you'll promise to pay me back when you get your cheque and car delivered to you. So this is what usually happens with these scams. They'll tell you you've won an amazing prize, then they tell you there's a little fee you have to pay first. And if you pay the fee, you never hear from the scammer again unless it's to ask for more fees. Anyway, so this all sounds really reasonable, doesn't it? So thanks, Daniel. I'm really looking forward to that. And you're going to help me with part of my fee. Oh, that's really kind of you. So what could I say but okay. So only a day passed and I had another email from Daniel Gary. And it says, as for the delivery charges, like I told you before, we can only share it equal. Waffle, waffle, waffle. So the charge on the delivery is $390, so we'll have to share it among us. And I'll pay some part, while you pay the rest that's best I can do for you. And then, interestingly, he volunteers some information I didn't ask for. Let me remind you, I'm a good Christian. I don't cheat on people and I don't steal people's money. I would never do such because God is against it. Okay, well, that all sounds very, very reassuring, and I'm glad that you're a man of God, Gary, so what could I say but, okay. At this point, Gary seems to lose his temper a little bit with me, which is a bit strange. I mean, I've been quite compliant so far. All I've said is okay. And he says, you cannot teach me my job that I've been doing for several years now and still doing it. That's the only way it works. If you can't pay part of the fee and I pay the rest, I'm afraid you'll have to forget it and we'll terminate the transaction. Well, seems a bit rude, doesn't it? I mean, I've been very compliant so far. So anyway, he says, until you're ready to abide with the company's rule, the choice is yours. Okay. Well, he's asked, so I said, okay. So Gary came back the next day and reiterated the fee remain as I told you before. It's $390 and I'll pay part of it, and why you also pay part of it. Please send your details so I can send it to the delivery. Why did you refuse to send your details since I keep asking you? Okay, well, indeed. I could only think of one thing to say, which was, okay. Daniel came back almost immediately and said, hello, are you ready to make the payment now so we can deliver your car and ATM card to you? Of course I'm ready. So I said, okay. At this point, it's rather amusing to see that Daniel Gary lost his temper, which is, of course, the goal of all of this. So Gary comes back and says, okay, what? Do you need the information? So you go to Western Union and make the payment. If you need the payment details, reply back and send me the payment details. So I replied back as he requested and I said, okay. And then it seems almost like Daniel's losing a little bit of hope and starting to plead a little. And so he's replied again saying, why keep saying okay? Kindly say something else so we can know what to do. Well, I can't really think of anything else to say. So I replied, okay. So that was the last I heard from Daniel Gary, and that was about a week ago. However, I've been emailing him every day just to keep in touch, and in fact sometimes several times a day. I can only think of one thing to say though, which is, okay. So at this point perhaps you're thinking I'm a bit unkind and maybe a little bit cruel to play games with these people. However, I intend to persuade you otherwise. Here's a little extract from a previous conversation when I was doing more elaborate conversations with these scammers and doing more elaborate scam baiting. I got to a point where they were asking me to pay the fees, and I thought I'd plead poverty. And so I said to them, I don't know where I'll get the money for the fees. If I pay even half that amount, I'll have no money for food for my children this month. This is why I thought maybe the fees could be deducted from the total. How can I do this? And then I followed it up with another message where I said something very similar. I said, isn't there any way to defer the fees until after the cheque clears and then I have funds? I don't know how I'll pay for rent and food this month if I take out money to pay fees. Do you have any advice on this? Well, it turns out they did have some useful advice, and here it is. The scammer said, I'm sorry, there's no other way. This is simple. Take the money for your rent and food and use it to pay. It will take just 24 hours to deliver this cheque to you, and then you can even buy your own house. Don't worry, just do what I say. And it's just an advice for you. Try as much as you can to send it today, and by tomorrow you'll cash the cheque and buy whatever you want to buy. Send your details so I can send the information and make the payment by Western Union or MoneyGram. So this scammer was perfectly willing to take food out of the mouths of children and make it impossible for a person to pay their rent in order to make his profit. So my conscience is reasonably clear when it comes to mucking about with these people, wasting their time and annoying them. So that's the end of this video really. Thanks for watching, and anyway, my advice to you is if you get one of these emails, just say okay to scammers. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.
So do you know that we are going to disconnect your landline as well as your internet line from today?
QAnon.
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 Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are using artificial intelligence to find some of the content and make it less visible to users.
In June, a young man showed up at the Hoover Dam, resulted in an armed standoff with law enforcement. He had a sign that said, "Release the OIG report."
It's a movement, man. It's the shift. I can feel it coming.
The key component flooding the minds of those who emphatically believe in the Q phenomenon is one of hope.
Letting us know that, he hears us and, we're on the same, it's the Q movement.
Is this a fun thing to know about, a fun thing to be a part of?
It's fun because things get revealed.
It's fun because we know before it's going to happen a lot of times.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
In late October of 2017, an anon from 4chan, under a thread titled Calm Before the Storm, made their first post, later calling themselves or selves Q, or Q Clearance Patriot, with Q Clearance being the highest level clearance in the Department of Energy, allowing access to top-secret restricted data and national security information. Many allude to the coincidences, or quote, breadcrumbs, of Q's posts as Q proofs, that Q is indeed close to Trump, or that Q Plus is even Trump himself. At 5:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, post 123, Q said, "Nothing is random, everything has meaning. +++. 8 minutes later at 5:15 Eastern Standard Time, Donald Trump tweeted, "Massive military and energy orders happening. +++. January 9th, 2018, an anon requested from Q, maybe Q can work the phrase tip-top into the State of the Union as a shout-out to the board. Meanwhile, references from Q saying follow the white rabbit had been posted. April 2nd, during Trump's commemoration of the White House Easter egg roll, Trump said this,
"And we keep it in tip-top shape. We call it sometimes tippy-top shape."
Q posted the same day saying, "It was requested. Did you listen today?" On January 7th, Trump flubbed a tweet misspelling consequential as, quote, consensual. He was ridiculed, quickly deleted the mistake and corrected it with a new tweet correctly spelling the word consequential. But to Q, this was all part of the plan. Q posted shortly after saying, "Important. Do you understand what just occurred? POTUS missing Q in select word. POTUS mods tweet 1 minute between. POTUS adds Q in select word, leading an anon on 8chan below to say, Almighty God bless and protect Q in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The fundamental declaration from Q and Q's followers is that Trump's Justice Department possesses thousands of sealed indictments, growing in numbers every day, against wealthy elites, Democratic insiders, and celebrities who are affiliated with the, quote, deep state, and are guilty of gross misdeeds and corruption, including the intent to assassinate the president, even satanic ritualistic pedophilic abuse. But according to Q, this is all about to change.
I don't know why that's funny. I mean, did you have any in-person briefings?
The elites will be thrown in jail on a mass scale of arrests, bringing a new dawn of justice for the disenfranchised. Our racial tensions will diminish because those defects are the fault of the elites, brainwashing us into division. Our religious tribalism will wash away, as that is the fault of the Rothschilds and George Soros. They're the ones turning the screws on our society to keep us fighting each other. And once they get put behind bars, true progress for the Republic will rise again. Okay, I think I represented that the best I could. So what are we to make of this? Firstly, an insidious claim floats around much of the QAnon community, that the blame for humanity's religious and racial tribalism lies primarily on the shoulders of elites who have, quote, engineered us into hate and disconnection.
We realized that the problem was never capitalism or socialism, Democrat or Republican, black or white, Muslim or Christian. We know it was just very powerful criminals who had too much power. With people still preoccupied with cabal-engineered social issues, they would likely revolt and hurt themselves and others.
This is a very simplistic, outside-in way to break down the most complicated parts of human nature, and has elements of a kind of boomer hope porn. It's false, and it wrongly aims the arrow of responsibility and change away from us. Although aspects of race do have their roots in social constructions, others are primarily biological, with in-group identity playing a role in how humans see themselves and relate to others. The American project is to find a way for different populations to coexist peacefully and relinquish the reflex to use our race-based identities against each other under the guise of politics. This is only attainable if more of us place our focus on self-ownership and personal responsibility rather than outward blame. And this attitude is thwarted so long as we continue to place the primary source of our conflict away from our own minds and onto elites. While it's true the media and politicians can exploit and exacerbate in-group identity, the media and politicians are only able to do that because of our already existing tribalistic attitudes. The ability for different ethnic groups in America to focus more on their similarities is indeed hindered by a media empire that perpetuates fear and isolation, both left and right. But we are the ones watching it. We are the ones who are drawn to vicariously enjoying the violence and division on the screen. We feel good when our side made the other side look bad, as that reinforces our lower-natured connection to our ape-like ancestors. Have you ever thought that elites aren't this anomalous product built of evil, but an extension of ourselves? We are a population fueled by our lower nature. It makes sense that liars and thieves would rise to the top. If Q's correct, and a mass event of arrests are about to occur, which many already are, but the bulk of indictments currently happening under Mueller seem to run counter to the narrative put forward by Q. We will still have all our work cut out for us. And if your response is, well, at least the corruption and lies will stop, you don't understand that a population needs no elites to corrupt and to lie. These are problems available for us to fix, and although we do live in a system that makes it more difficult to fix, they do not and cannot make it impossible. The real matrix we're stuck in is between our ears. What about Q's validity? Is he, or she, or they really who they say they are? No one can say for certain, as they can't know. But Q's posts and the growing phenomena surrounding it do mire some dimensions of the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon and the consilience principle. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is the notion that once the mind notices something new, they begin to notice it much more often, in ways that can seem, at least to the observer, beyond mere coincidence. And the consilience principle is the scientific principle that independent, unrelated sources can converge to strong conclusions. For instance, what you're seeing now are different images that are not related to each other. Some are videos I have made, some are different movie clips from the cinema, the rest are totally random. Or are they? If you tried your hardest, could you extract a common thread among all of them that would convince anyone they're linked, at least as it pertains to the thing you link it to? Charles Darwin's Origin of Species was published in 1859. 1 plus 8 plus 5 plus 9 equals 23. The Hiroshima bomb was dropped at 8:15 a.m. 8 plus 15 equals 23. The Twin Tower attacks were on 9/11/2001. Add up the digits, you get 23. This happened at the World Trade Center, or WTC. W is the 23rd letter of the alphabet. T is the 20th letter, with C being the third. 20 plus 3 is 23. Arguably the greatest basketball player in the NBA was number 23. Each parent contributes 23 chromosomes to the start of human life. The nuclei of cells in human bodies have 46 chromosomes, made out of 23 pairs. Jordan Peterson seems to also understand, as his video 23 Minutes from Maps of Meaning intentionally ends in 23.23 seconds. The very first Morse code transmission, "What hath God wrought?" was from the Bible passage Numbers 23:23. The average human physical biorhythm is 23 days. The Latin alphabet has 23 numbers. My logo, 2 triangles with 3 sides, 23. 2 divided by 3 is 0.666 recurring. Take the devil's numbers, add 2 plus 3, 23. The most famous and most quoted of the Psalms is number 23. 23 is the most used number in all of cinema.
23.
23. 23.
23rd century.
23.
23. Apartment buildings, 23rd.
23 minutes to doorknob.
23 days.
23. But you...
And Tilly returned from their world.
23, sir.
Britney Spears had her 23rd baby today.
23 supercharged. 23 degrees. 23 degrees.
23 degrees.
23.
23.
23.
23. How many years?
By now it must be 23 years.
Digital animal freaking folks. Digital animal freaking folks. Digital animal freaking folks. Digital animal freaking folks. Shoot a lot and lip, get split like Gemini. 2 hemispheres, 2 mind, 1 pan fry. Digital animal freaking folks.
Whoever Q is totally unverifiable. What's true here is that many followers of Q are interpreting his poetic posts through a lens of consilience, the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, and confirmation bias. This does not mean that Q is completely illegitimate. It means that to the average person, this is a picture of Trump and his team. To a Q follower, this is a carefully choreographed stage to line up each person's thumb in the shape of a Q, therefore validating Q's authenticity and shouting out to the board. A Q follower posted this picture to Twitter, and a follower below noticed part of the URL listed DOITQ, quote, do it Q, showing to them that Trump's team created the URL in another attempt to send a message. Combine this with a closer examination of the newspaper below Trump, with a headline talking about high-level arrests in Saudi Arabia, a country which Q says is the third side of the, quote, cabal. You have yourself some serious firepower for belief that all these seemingly independent and unrelated sources have converged into a strong conclusion that Q is real and everything is going according to plan. Or it's just a picture. How do you see this picture? How do you see Q? How do you see the world?
Digital animal freaking folks. Digital animal freaking folks. Digital animal freaking folks.
I sometimes get asked how could I possibly, quote, believe in UFOs. But rather than just believing, which implies an absence of objectivity and not a process of discovery, it's a fact that sometimes we cannot readily identify what we see in the sky. Still, there are many who continue to think this topic is absurd, claiming that by acknowledging the data at all, that one is also claiming UFOs are, quote, aliens.
So there are a myriad of UFO nuts out there who are going to tell me that I'm closed-minded for not believing the rather outrageous claim that Earth is being visited by aliens.
I'm not saying they're aliens. I'm just interested in looking at the data, which is precisely what we'll be doing here. What you're about to see is the most famous UFO event in the world, and one that I think is significant, but some skeptics disagree. Let's see what you think.
Turned a lot of heads, made worldwide news, and then it was denied.
It is the most famous UFO sighting in the world.
What many aren't aware of is that 2 years before the Phoenix Lights, Dr. Lynn Kitai noticed something unusual outside her window.
In 1995, both my husband and I witnessed 3 amber orbs in a triangle formation, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath, very close to our home, about 100 yards from our home. It was startling, and it was amazing at the same time.
2 years passed, with Dr. Lynn noticing nothing in the sky coming close to resembling what she previously saw, until a month and a half before the Phoenix Lights event, and she saw them again and recorded it.
January 22nd, 1997, I noticed 3 amber orbs now at a distance far west on the horizon. And I get an operator on the phone and I said, quick, you got to get somebody out there. There's some strange lights in front of South Mountain. As I finish my sentence, they're gone.
Dr. Lynn then picks up her phone to call the Arizona Republic to get information on the lights.
The operator got off, she got right back on. She said, nope, nobody called. Well, I know I called.
The next morning, she calls the Arizona Republic again, but instead of asking them about the origin of the, quote, orbs, she asks if they received any calls last night in regards to the lights. The operator pled ignorance and directed Lynn's inquiry to Luke Air Force Base, but after briefly speaking with a critical lieutenant who claimed they had nothing to do with it, they directed her to the airport, who said the following.
He said, actually, there were 3 at 8 o'clock. They looked on radar. They didn't show up on radar. The 3 disappeared. After he picked up binoculars to look, it was that unusual. They were 6 points of light that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't see what it was attached to. Slowly moving in synchrony, as he put it. So I said, well, where were they? And there was silence. And finally he says, beats me.
Reported at 6:55 p.m., a man in Henderson, Nevada witnessed an object in the shape of a V with 6 large lights pass over him from the northwest. 8:15 p.m., former police officer Tom Chavez witnessed a cluster of 5 orange lights, consisting of 4 lights together with a 5th light seemingly trailing the other 4.
They didn't glare. They did not emit like a beam, like a floodlight, like landing aircraft lamp. There seemed to be some depth to them.
Calls began to flood police stations and media offices across multiple districts, including Chino Valley, Prescott Valley, Dewey, Cords Junction, Wickenburg, Cave Creek, and many other communities to the north and west of Phoenix. Then, this happened.
Wait, where? There's another one too. Where? Oh, look at that. There's another one. No, we're just excited. We're not. They keep coming. Wait, I see. Whoa, look at them. I got that one.
But what some misunderstand is this video shows the second event. The majority of sightings actually occurred before this in the state of Nevada and Arizona. The Public Affairs Office at Luke Air Force Base announced that their personnel had investigated these lights, establishing they were flares launched from an A-10 Warthog. But miles of controversy exist over this claim, so much so that 3 years after the sighting, the Arizona National Guard staged a demonstration to quell the claims made from those who kept saying what they saw was not flares. Judge for yourself in this side-by-side comparison. ultimately, whether we're looking at flares or not, holds no bearing on the thousands of sightings that happened previously, reporting a V-shaped craft moving slowly and quietly through the entire state of Arizona. This leads many to claim three possibilities in regards to these lights. One being that they are not flares. Two being if they are flares, it's simply a random coincidence of timing. Or three, someone was likely instructed to do it on purpose in order to provide an explanation for this.
We were telling ourselves not to blink.
It was very close to the ground. It was just like floating over the housetops.
The first thing that struck me is that they were just in a V-shaped formation. Well, it's at night, and guys wouldn't have been flying in a V-shaped formation, in a VIC. We'd call it a VIC. So now I'm looking at 5 lights passing overhead silently at a very slow rate. And it also occurred to me that they were flying too slow to stay in the air if it was an aircraft.
It must have been around 10-ish, and I'm looking off towards the north. Coming in directly at me are these 3 enormous lights, and they're moving incredibly slow.
When somebody in our group said, "Oh my gosh, what is that up above?" we all looked up at the same time and saw this amazing, huge, dark, silent object.
My emotion was that of just kind of wonderment and trying to figure out, what am I looking at? What am I seeing here?
Purportedly, the craft moved south across the entire state of Arizona. Witnesses claim whatever it was totally quiet.
There was absolutely no sound at all.
Just 3 beautiful lights coming towards us. And it seemed to move effortlessly, just glided right over.
This was one solid object, one craft, one big, large boomerang.
Everybody that called me said the same thing. It was huge, it was slow, it was low, it was totally silent. They could see some lights, somewhere between 5 and 9 lights on it at any given time.
Claiming the lights had abnormal characteristics.
It was an orangish amber light, and it was so rich and lustrous, it's almost as if the objects seemed to be comprised of the light itself.
They were more like glowing, gaseous globes.
There's no flaring. They're like a ball. On the video, they flicker, they're white, they're much smaller. But nonetheless, the formations themselves are compelling.
When it got directly over my head, and I mean, I'm talking dead center here, I was right underneath this thing. It was like there was no filament in this thing. They appear to be in a canister. There was light swimming around in this shape or form.
And they weren't beaming down like landing lights. They were just big balls of light, but very pretty.
And the craft was said to be massive, with some gauging it to be more than a mile wide.
We could not see the whole object from front to back, from side to side. It was so big.
I would gauge this object to be several football fields. I mean, like a mile, maybe more than a mile, maybe even 2 miles. It was huge.
I put my hand up to where the nose of the craft was, and I took my other arm out to where the end of the wing was, and it was well over 30 inches. And I said to my wife at the time, I said, that's a mile long.
It was coming over the mountain, and it was like almost as wide as one of the humps. And it was very low.
It's coming across the sky, and as it's moving, it's blocking and unblocking the stars. There is actually a shape.
The object we saw, if we opened up a newspaper, you could not block out the object that we saw.
It's one of the biggest things I've ever seen that moved like that. I mean, it was just enormous.
There was like a light grid. It was almost dancing to a beat, dim light, almost shadow behind. I wouldn't say that it was intense, but it was definitely profound.
When you look down the street on a hot day in Phoenix, above the street's like, it's really wavy, and you see everything kind of distorted, and that's what it looked like up inside the middle of the craft.
It was just gliding, and then it stopped, and then it like, the sides retracted a little, and then it was gone.
Just went.
Acceleration to deceleration, it was no noise the whole time.
And not a sound.
So how about we work together and try to figure out what this thing is?
Even after thousands of calls to city officials from citizens requesting answers of just what happened, no explanation came. Then after a few months, the governor at the time, Fife Symington, finally, on June 19th, made a statement.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please. It's, you know, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
But eventually, he explained why he felt the need to make light of March 13th.
People coming into my office saying this thing is just reaching heights of hysteria and concern. And so 3 of us sort of sat down at the end and decided to try to lighten the mood a little bit.
He then, after being retired for some time, opened up about his experience witnessing the first event.
And I told Ann what I was doing. I was going to go up to Squaw Peak and see what everybody was, you know, clamoring about.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
But you know, that was total bunk. Those I've seen high altitude flares before. I mean, that wasn't, they weren't flares.
And when I walked in the front door, she looked at me, and I was apparently just, normally I'm fair-complected and pale anyway, right? And she said, oh my gosh, she said she looked like a ghost.
I still, behind the scenes, tried to investigate it, but I got nowhere.
There were the sightings of the America West plane coming into Sky Harbor, said he could have landed on it.
It was enormous, like an aircraft carrier in the sky. Is that about as close as it gets?
I think that's a fair description,
oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, in your gut, you could just tell that it was otherworldly.
What did you see? And I said, well, I don't know what I saw, but it was really something, and I'm not going to talk about it.
Once I realized how large it was, it just faded off into the night just quite quickly. I wanted it to last longer. I wanted to see more of it. It just went away.
According to director of Skeptoid.com Brian Dunning, all eyewitness accounts should be approached with a shrug, claiming that the Phoenix lights were flares. Deal with it. Dunning continues, saying the Phoenix lights fall well within the wide range of brightness that's possible from LUU-2 illumination flares at 70 miles. And as was said before, the Air Force Base did claim responsibility for the Phoenix lights, as stated here by Captain Drew Sullins.
And they were dropping high-intensity flares that deploy on a little parachute and descend to the Earth. And we think that those flares were mistakenly called UFOs by the folks in the valley in Phoenix there.
Again, even if they were flares, they were dropped in a completely different location than was reported by eyewitnesses, spanning over 400 miles from Henderson, Nevada to Tucson, Arizona. The media at the time breezed over this fact entirely and only focused on this video in Phoenix. If, as some claim, the military deployed these flares so they could use them as an explanation for the first event, it worked beautifully. Because once the military claimed responsibility, that was all the public and the media needed to put the matter to rest, remaining ignorant of everything else that occurred before it. Depending on your biases, it's either easy or difficult to say what this video shows. What's undeniable, however, is that fundamentally it's a red herring, distracting from the first event. Because receiving one call of a V-shaped silent craft is odd. Receiving thousands is something else entirely.
To fly a craft, it wasn't even flying. How could something fly, be lifted by air, going that slow? Not possible.
It was huge, and it was, again, it was at least a mile or two in diameter. I mean, the fucking thing was ginormous.
I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape.
At the time, there was this house that was being constructed up on the hill, and there was a telephone pole.
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
Now, I saw that. I don't give a goddamn what anybody else says about it. I saw that.
Then it breaks into like 3 pieces and speeds across the runway.
That day changed my whole perspective on life.
It blew my mind. I knew there was more in this world and universe than anything imaginable.
UFOs have seen a resurgence among the mainstream media.
Because he says he was abducted by aliens 45 years ago. Calvin Parker joins me now.
Since the New York Times and Washington Post published their first articles on the 2004 Nimitz encounter, they and the rest of the media have continued to publish articles relating to the topic, with most of the New York Times articles written collectively by Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper, New York Times journalist Ralph Blumenthal, and UFO author and journalist for the Huffington Post Leslie Kean, all of whom are urging the world to take the phenomenon seriously. After the story hit, Blumenthal went on MSNBC to reveal that the Pentagon UAP program did not, contrary to what many claim, end in 2012.
It really has continued, we found out.
So what's been going on? And why have they not publicized the fact that it has continued?
Well, it's a controversial program.
Claiming the Pentagon program has attained materials from these objects and is currently studying their properties.
So they have made some progress.
What type of material?
They don't know. They're studying it, but it's some kind of compound that they don't recognize.
But if all this is actually true, how'd they get it? It's possible that we'll get some form of this answer soon.
Well, yeah, when I reflect upon what we've been able to accomplish, I sit here and kind of go, yay and hey.
It's likely the material Blumenthal was referencing, among apparently many other forms of material from unrelated events, are currently being analyzed by To the Stars Academy, a public benefit corporation whose team includes 5 insiders who were high up in the CIA, NSA, Lockheed Martin, and recently added Dr. Norm Kahn, whose experience in the CIA spans over 30 years, all of whom participants in the newly founded ATOM Research Project, which stands for Acquisition and Data Analysis of Materials.
We remain, cautiously optimistic, right? And we're going to leave no stone unturned. And so far, the stones that we have turned over, some have yielded some really pretty fantastic results.
But in the minds of many, this process of so-called disclosure from To the Stars has all but fizzled out.
There's a lot of people who are impatient for information, and rightfully so. I get it. We're human beings. We want our information. We want it now, and why are you holding back? But sometimes you have to let the right people in the right positions digest information, right? Sometimes you can't expect a 10-course meal to be digested all in one bite. It just can't happen.
We'll have to wait and see if they follow through with something substantial. I doubt the materials they have will turn out to be completely benign, given how foolish a move it would be to get everyone's hopes up only to say months later, oops, it's nothing. That said, this is the same group who claimed this was a picture of a UFO, only for the public to find out later it was a balloon. It's highly unlikely the ATOM Project will be revealing extraterrestrial materials, but rather metamaterials, which is still interesting if indeed they were found on an unknown vehicle. But it does lead to a much simpler terrestrial but still mysterious explanation of what humans created it and where. Since the New York Times article, Fox News appears to have dedicated more time than any other network to discussing this topic. They even spent time talking to a supposed abductee, Calvin Parker.
What were they in? Were they in some sort of spacecraft?
And why is Jesse so serious? Jesse Waters is arguably one of the most cynical media pundits out there, yet his composure here is strange. It's as if he's interviewing a Russian diplomat. That's weird. One would expect the opposite, as he must inwardly know that the questions he's having to ask sound absurd.
What did they do to you when they took you up in space, or wherever they took you?
Tucker Carlson is another example of a Fox News pundit who all of a sudden thinks we need to take UFOs seriously.
That's terrifying. So, I mean, these are aircraft unidentified that are operating in very close proximity to the U.S. military.
Treating those involved with To the Stars with sincerity and respect.
And the government isn't responding adequately, and I hope you keep sounding the alarm on this. I hope this tape goes everywhere. Thank you for your bravery. This just seems like a story that we should be covering much more than we do, and I hope you will come back. You seem sober and believable, and I appreciate it.
Why, thank you very much, Tucker.
Thanks. Leslie, thank you for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. I appreciate your interest in this.
Disclosure is the process where sections in the government coordinate with respected journalists, credentialed institutions, and the mainstream media to slowly unveil information they've kept secret about UFOs. Others call it confirmation, given how much they claim to already know regarding the phenomenon. So you could ask yourself, is it true of your experience that you've been seeing more connections lately between the topic of UFOs and respected journalists, credentialed institutions, and the mainstream media? This leads many to claim we're in the middle of disclosure, but I would like to add that the New York Times has consistently broken stories in the past that changed the public's perception of the world. It's not necessarily that some elite group of influencers are putting out disclosure, but that the environment for discussing UFOs has been made easier for those in the spotlight. But even if that's true, a pertinent question still exists. With it being almost a year later, why did the Pentagon do this at all? The public didn't have to know. Or did we? I continue to remain unconvinced of this speculation. Too often one prefers conspiracy over a more conventional explanation. It's true that false flags have happened in the past. The Gulf of Tonkin, Operation Northwoods, Project TP Ajax are all verified examples of government conspiracy, with the CIA being at the heart of every American false flag event. The theory goes that To the Stars is set up to create an us versus them threat narrative.
Threat identification program.
And that the reason we're seeing what appears to be UFO disclosure is because elite sections of the intelligence agencies are setting the stage for an orchestrated and fake alien invasion in order to pursue a particular agenda. They will use top secret technology, some of which they claim has been back engineered by E.T. Craft, against the public. They then blame it on outside invaders and build from there. Jim Simivan is arguably the leader of To the Stars. He's also been a spy for the CIA for 25 years, with many claiming he's never actually stopped his clandestine operations.
I worked as a spy for 25 years in the CIA's clandestine service. Had a wonderful career there, enjoyed it very, very much. Was lucky enough to be a member of the Senior Intelligence Service. I currently consult with the intelligence community on a part-time basis.
That's pretty sketchy. These guys must be aware that they're stepping into a community of people who detest the intelligence agencies of the US. But the frivolity with which Jim Simivan admits to his long career as a spy makes him seem oblivious to this. Or maybe he does know the public would react skeptically to it. I don't know. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I trust these people. I've criticized them in the past, suggesting they could be operating as tools for disinformation. I'm saying the fake alien invasion narrative is grounded in nothing firm. One can be skeptical of To the Stars without buying into the false flag hypothesis. I also find myself in the middle of an online culture that gives the CIA far too much credit. Contrary to what most think, the CIA has not shown themselves to be very good at committing false flags without getting caught. Many also seem to conflate certain unethical CIA top-secret projects like MKUltra mind control with successful results. MKUltra was controversial not because they were successfully brainwashing people, but because of its violations of human rights. The organization was participating in what could easily be called the torture of humans, even the molesting of children. It's terrifying, but it doesn't mean the CIA can control your thoughts. It means what they did was completely immoral, and for something that was never supposed to see the light of day and be top secret, we sure do know a lot about it. Although most records were destroyed in 1973 by order of CIA Director Richard Helms, more information is still coming forward, even this month, of the atrocious methods conducted by the CIA. Don't get me wrong, the CIA as an organization is sophisticated and clever, and I'm certainly not claiming they can't keep a secret well. I'm saying that I disagree with the deification of their influence and results. Just because they're sophisticated and intelligent doesn't mean they're mythological global puppet masters, unless you want to argue that they have committed false flags in secret and gotten away with it without being caught, and even done so recently, like the Las Vegas shooting, for instance. Well, I can't argue with that, as it's unfalsifiable. I can say, however, that if you just look at their track record, it's not irrational to see that in general, there are people who make all the same mistakes every other institution, secretive or otherwise, does. Is it really that difficult to grant that sometimes someone really does go crazy and shoot everyone? And imagine what it would take to pull off an alien invasion. I mean, where do I even begin? So I think it's relatively safe to say that if an event actually did happen where our world collided with what appeared to be aliens, it probably wasn't from Luis Elizondo, but something else. It surprises me how many still think this is a topic best left to the fringes of the internet and boomer UFO conferences. Two YouTubers whose content I enjoy, and two people whom I respect, Computing Forever and Armored Skeptic, focus only on taking down the low-hanging fruit, missing the forest from the trees. They take down simple fallacies, saying things like, just because it's a UFO doesn't mean it's an alien.
People will ask, well Dave, if it's not a UFO, then what is it? What's your explanation? Well, I don't know for sure, but if you're going to substitute a lack of evidence with a God of the Gaps argument and say, if in doubt, aliens...
Which is a non-argument, because those who make it fail to understand that by making it, you're actually acknowledging the phenomenon, just not a particular explanation of said phenomenon. Of course, UFO does not mean alien. Dave admits he doesn't know for sure. Then strawmans an explanation I didn't make. All one has to grant is that occasionally we humans have seen objects in the sky and didn't know what it was. That's it. And one would have to lie to themselves or be delusional about the world not to grant that. UFOs are a continually reported thing, with the vast majority, upwards of 95% when scrutinized, being drones, flares, balloons, meteors, blimps, abnormal weather phenomena, and a host of other benign things. This is a fact. It's also a fact that the remaining 5% or so are true unknowns. It doesn't mean they're alien. It means they're true unknowns. This question assumes we humans are privy to a highway of activity, but to call UFO sightings rare is an understatement. These events are truly once in 100 lifetimes. There is no highway of activity, but rather a low number of isolated incidents, like the Phoenix Lights, where honest analysis and intense scrutiny and skepticism will push you away from the skeptical consensus. For instance, if a father tells me he saw a mile-wide, triangular-shaped craft glide silently over his home, I urge psychiatry. When his children and wife say they saw it too, I urge family therapy. When the neighbors across the street say they saw the same thing and describe it in the same way, I begin to wonder if they're trying to trick me and this is all an elaborate joke. When more families on the other side of town, then police officers, then school teachers, then pilots, then the governor say they too also saw a mile-wide V-shaped object glide silently over their homes, it's now on me to make a decision. Are tens of thousands of people suffering from a mass delusion? Or did they see a true unknown?
I was kind of in awe, really, you know.
How big?
Bigger than anything I've ever seen in the sky.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky?
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
Is it really the skeptical take to dismiss all eyewitness accounts as mass delusion? When did being skeptical become synonymous with finding ordinary conclusions? Could it be possible that sometimes, paradoxically, the simplest explanation is the more perplexing one? Or I could say it like this: could it be possible that sometimes the simplest explanation is to say, I don't know what it was?
Everyone is walking around with a 4K 60 frames per second camera on their phone. If these so-called true unknowns exist, why are more people uploading crystal clear close-up images of these objects?
Phone cameras, especially as it pertains to low-light capability, are terrible. For instance, this is a video I took of a plane flying over my apartment at night on an iPhone set to 4K. As you can see, it looks terrible. If I claim this was a UFO, you might scoff and say, why are all these UFO videos filmed on a potato? I mean, we're all walking around with 4K cameras on our phones. Shouldn't we be getting an image of a flying saucer in HD? It sounds like people who make this argument are ignorant of the inadequacies present in our modern phone cameras. While it's true that phone cameras work better during the day, they still attain noise the very moment they begin to zoom. And once you're fully in zoom, trying to focus on an object that is miles away, way, which almost all UFOs are, given that they're UFOs, unsurprisingly makes them blurry and out of focus. So in the current year, when someone sees something unusual in the sky and they try and capture it on their new iPhone, they struggle to make the image on their phones, especially at night, match what they're seeing with their eyes.
You can't see it on the camera, guys.
Goodness!
Wait, you can just.
What is it?
I don't know. I wish I could pick it up with
It's
my
coming
camera.
back round again.
But Malfi, even if I grant you that phone cameras aren't the best at capturing objects that are far away, I'm still questioning why they're always so far away. Why doesn't a flying saucer land in the middle of Yankee Stadium during the last game of the World Series? This is evidence I would need.
Arguably, even that evidence would inspire a world of conspiracies, doubts, false flag theories, and ridicule. Most would also likely see the video as so completely incredible, they would think it was CGI. Video on its own is not the best evidence. It's when the video is combined with corroborating evidence, radar data, eyewitness testimony, electro-optical data, and government or civilian documentation of the event that it becomes impossible to ignore. But I'll grant you that, hypothetically, we would have all of that if a flying saucer landed in the middle of Yankee Stadium. But that hasn't happened, has it? Look at it like this. In the case of the Phoenix Lights that I just discussed, you're still stuck having to figure out if thousands of people from Arizona suffered a collective delusion or saw a true unknown. That dichotomy doesn't suddenly disappear just because you presented me with the hypothetical scenario. Also, this question, yet again, appears to assume an alien explanation. For skeptics, it boggles my mind that you're always the ones obsessed with aliens. It's almost like I have to tell you that UFOs could be terrestrial, top-secret craft built by foreign or domestic governments. So if that were the case, landing your top-secret craft in the middle of Yankee Stadium wouldn't make any sense.
But Malfi, you often speak of the validity of the UAP videos released from the Pentagon, but Armored Skeptic made a video debunking the gimbal footage taken in 2015. Do you find his analysis accurate?
A lot of Armored Skeptic's analysis was brilliant. He even conceded this.
Even though I have never personally seen a UFO in my life, I can't escape the certainty that something is happening in our skies that defies our knowledge of the universe.
He then falls back on the UFO doesn't mean it's alien.
I really want to believe that UFOs and aliens are real, but we have no reason to believe that this is alien.
I suppose I shouldn't be so hard on some who continue to make this non-argument. In the case of Armored Skeptic, his audience would likely crucify him if he didn't say this, given how much the alien explanation has taken hold of most who are fascinated by this topic. But it's still low-hanging fruit, much like those who make anti-Jordan Peterson videos and focus solely on the cult of personality that surrounds him. That said, all in all, I think Armored Skeptic's videos on the topic were fantastic. It's his analysis of the gimbal footage, however, that we respectfully part ways.
If you track the motion, the object basically takes a straight path. The FA-18 is the one that's changing direction. But what about the fact that the object rotates? Well, the rotation that we see is likely a result of the casing around the camera rotating. The infrared camera is mounted on a double gimbal system, allowing it to rotate and point in any direction. We see similar rotating heat signatures in other military videos.
This was a claim floating around the debunking community months after this UAP release hit the internet. Others include that the video is also doing a kind of parallax effect, meaning that the clouds below, combined with the moving F-18 that's on a left turn, merely gives the illusion that this object is moving from right to left, when it's really just flying in a straight line. Armored also presented the option that it could be sitting still, then alluded that the object is just a jet. Before I take these one by one, let me start by saying that in order to grant Armored's general analysis, which is the mainstream skeptical analysis, that what this is a jet, you have to concede that in this circumstance, multiple US Navy fighter pilots could not identify an object they were currently flying in. I'll start with the weakest part first, that nothing hinges on, but still contradicts the jet hypothesis. While it's true that gimbal cameras rotate on an axis, it's also true that one of the pilots witnessing the object said, quote, "It's rotating." Could it be that the reason the gimbal changes its axis was in reaction to the rotation of the object? Many have also argued the object appears to make the first move. I'll let you decide for yourself on that one. But as you're about to see, absolutely nothing hinges on this. Why would the pilot say it's rotating if it wasn't? In every analysis I can find, those who claim this video is a jet always leave this and many other parts we're about to get to out. They leave out that the other pilot, who's looking at his radar, reports there's a whole fleet of them.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
Recognize that now you have to grant that multiple US Navy fighter pilots couldn't identify not just one jet, but a fleet of jets. Why leave this out? It seems awfully convenient. If your explanation so far, however, is to say that there were no real pilots and this is all just fake, then you're the conspiracy theorist now, not me. I'm just looking at this as well as I can. I'm not making up scenarios to try and get away from what I'm looking at and listening to. Armored then shows how similar images can be made with the gimbal camera, and shows this image of a jet's exhaust plume as a general explanation for the object. While it's true this video of a jet's exhaust plume has the same color, it also shows a massive jet. Skeptics have countered this by saying the gimbal video was much further away, so any image of a jet would just disappear, but they provide no evidence for this and can point to 0 reenactments. If it's just a jet chasing a jet, there should be thousands of these reenactments, or someone should at least be able to recreate it. Now you have to grant that multiple Navy fighter pilots are tracking down a fleet of exhaust plumes. Others who claim this is a jet say it merely appears as though it's moving from right to left because of the parallax effect, but is actually just a jet moving in a straight line. This does not hold scrutiny, and I can prove it. Notice in the end of the video how the clouds on the bottom slow down, as the object appears to be and is reported to be slowing down to a near halt. If the object was moving in a straight line and not right to left, why do the clouds slow down substantially as the object also slows down? And here's the proof. Recognize that the speed on the F-18 stays the same, which is right here on the bottom left, and the turn radius, which is here, remains left side up. This is proof that the plane is moving at the same speed in the same direction. This is proof that the slowing of the clouds and object is not coming from the plane slowing down to a near halt, which wouldn't make any sense, and it's not coming from the plane changing direction, but it's coming from the object slowing down. If you think I'm messing with the video, please, I've provided a link in the description so you can verify the fact for yourself. And let's get to yet another feature of this video that the skeptics ignore, which is that the object breaks lock. Could you imagine if this jet suddenly broke lock and shifted effortlessly to the right? How on earth can anyone with eyes ignore this in their analysis? How can they ignore the pilot saying it's rotating? How can they ignore the pilot saying there's a fleet of them? How can they ignore the slowing down of the clouds but not the jet, proving the object is slowing down without losing any of its velocity? I hope I have shown how these skeptical breakdowns are often, at the very least, incomplete.
That's what was funky. I mean, how could something move so fast like that?
Given how often those who detail personal UFO events are subject to ridicule, especially if they're credentialed airmen, some who were present during the Nimitz encounter have refused to come forward, but many have. What you're about to see has been detailed and corroborated by military personnel, sailors, Navy aviators, former commanding officer David Fravor, former senior chief petty officer Kevin Day, operations specialists Trevor, who will not disclose his last name, and former lieutenant commander Jim Clean Slate.
I was sitting back there and I noticed these tracks on the scope.
November 10th, 2004, 2 weeks before the event, the USS Princeton noticed 8 to 10 unknown objects with the advanced AN Spy-1B passive radar.
I didn't really think much about them at first. There were 8 to 10 of them at the time.
Systems specialist Trevor was the first to notify the captain of the unknowns.
It would be stationary, and then boom, it would move.
The objects showed up at 28,000 feet, moving slow.
And they started tracking south, and the strange thing about them is they were 28,000 feet going 100 knots, which is really, really strange.
They also moved erratically and randomly.
If it's aircraft, it would be moving like a solid movement across the string, whereas here it's like jumping around.
It kind of resembled, if you can imagine, watching snowflakes fall from the sky.
To ensure the radar wasn't defective, Officer Kevin Day contacted other ships asking if they were seeing the same thing.
And sure enough, everyone else was seeing them too at that time.
The radar team and captain continued to be the only ones who knew about these objects on both the USS Princeton and the USS Nimitz, numbering just over 20 witnesses so far.
And meanwhile, my entire team on Princeton is trying to figure this thing out. And believe me, we were going through our checklist, trying to figure out what these things are, because that's our job.
As night fell, they disappeared, but showed up again the following morning. This went on sporadically. For several days, the objects disappeared and reappeared in excess of 100 times. Then, on November 14th, a scheduled routine training exercise was about to begin.
It went left, and then it banged straight up. I mean, it was insane.
This thing falls straight out of the sky in less than a second.
Former commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, David Fravor, and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, along with the rest of the crew, were still unaware of the objects, both of whom accompanied by a weapons systems officer sitting behind them.
We're going to climb up to 20,000 feet. We're going to go to our point about 40 miles south, and we're going to hold, wait for the other airplane.
Up until then, Petty Officer Kevin Day's experience of the unknowns had certainly been unusual. However, it was on this day he began to get worried.
Now, I wasn't really concerned about him until the morning of the 14th when we had an air defense exercise.
Officer Day pulls his captain and air defense commander aside, telling him that he doesn't think the objects are hostile, but his concern, however, is safety of flight.
Because we're getting ready to put a bunch of aircraft in the air, and I highly recommend that we go out and investigate one of these things and see what they are. He immediately concurred.
After reporting this to his captain, Princeton Radar instructed the pilots to change course and investigate the radar spot.
We took control of the flight.
They said, hey, we're going to cancel the air defense exercise.
Above them, an E-2 Hawkeye from the Wallbanger Squadron is directing the aircraft. The weather is clear, with zero cloud cover. Princeton Radar asked if they currently had ammunition.
Fast Eagle 110, say loadout.
And again, there was a stunned silence because that was a very strange question to hear.
They are now very close to the target, finding themselves in a merged plot visual arena, meaning they should no longer have to use radar to locate what they're looking for.
The contact that we're trying to see and us are inside the resolution cell of the radar, which means they can't discern the two of us.
It's at this point Fravor sees something.
And all of a sudden on the radio, we have it in the overhead speaker. All of a sudden I hear, oh my God, I'm engaged, I'm engaged.
He observes a turbulent oval area of churning water with foam and frothy waves.
And I see something in the water, and it looks like about the size of a 737 in the water, pointing east.
100, anchor here, Angels 2-4. Roger. Charlie, Fast Eagle. We're observing something in the water here, possibly aircraft in the water at the merge plot, just north of our position, about 2 miles. Charlie, roger. I'm descending to Angels 14 to take a look.
This object fell straight out of the sky from 28,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean. What I found out later was 0.78 seconds.
In order for an object to do that, it would need to be traveling 48,000 miles an hour.
Oh, well above supersonic. It like a bullet out of a gun, it took off.
This thing did whatever it did without creating a sonic boom.
On the right-hand side of the airplane, just forward of the wing line, is this little white, which looks like a Tic Tac, which is why we call it the Tic Tac. And it's moving around erratically, so it's doing this. you know, it's not, it's moving just randomly around.
Fravor pursues the object.
It kind of recognizes that we're there and it starts to mirror us. So now think of it at the 6 o'clock position, we're at the 12 o'clock position, we're coming down and it starts coming up.
Commander Fravor is now less than a mile away. He continues.
I go, well, the only way I'm going to get this is to do an aggressive out-of-plane maneuver. He's over here, and I go like this.
He jumped 1,000 meters.
It literally is 1 minute it's there, and the next minute it's like poof, and it's gone. We do a 180 and go back to the location we're at, and there's nothing in the water.
Strike Group Air Defense has arbitrary points in the sky called caps that are told to the crew so everyone knows where that point is.
This object suddenly disappeared off the scope.
We start going back to the cap, and the Princeton controller calls us up and he says,
Of course, everyone is now listening to this intercept.
Says, hey, I'll never forget it. He goes, sir, you're not going to believe this.
Sir, you're not going to believe this.
I said, what? He says, that thing is at your cap. It's hanging out right where you're supposed to be.
The unknown is at your cap station.
Once Fravor came back, several pilots began leaving on their own to intercept the objects.
And all of a sudden, the next thing we know, we've got all these other pilots doing autonomous intercepts on their own. And as soon as the pilots went back up to their assigned altitudes, the objects popped all back into the sky to 28,000 feet and kept going 100 knots as if nothing exciting had happened.
Both Commander Fravor and Operations Specialist Trevor admit to seeing much clearer videos while on board the Princeton, uploaded to the CIFRNet.
So only certain people have access to that internet. So it's a highly secure net.
Trevor was the first person to notify the captain of the objects. The officers later invited him to watch the video to see if it matched what he was observing on radar.
This object, if you're looking at the screen, it went left and then it banked straight up.
When you look at the high-res video, that good luck finding it, but the original video...
And then it just, boom, it goes up, and I remember the officer saying, there's nothing on this planet that can do that. It's not possible.
When he goes into TV mode, he's pretty zoomed in. You can see there's two little things that stick out of the bottom of it.
I don't think they'll ever release it. And I think footage that they do release and will release, they're going to make it fuzzy. They're not going to make it clear for you guys, and they're going to cut it up. You know they know what they're doing, man. Isn't it kind of obvious?
I make UFO videos to hopefully bring a fresh perspective, to expose parts of the skeptical analysis
when we finally figured out how the reactor and the amplifier work together. That was a breakthrough. When we finally figured out how to shut the reactor off, that was a breakthrough. But I mean, every single thing was amazing to us. It's like, you know, having a couple little children
Hughes, who is the aviation tech aboard